evening once again, and welcome to Doctor on Call. It's a pleasure as always. Of course, every Tuesday evening at 8 o'clock, we bring you this special program. This evening, we continue with our look at diabetes awareness. Of course, it's Diabetes Awareness Month, and this evening, we will be paying special attention to women's health. We have two very special guests with us, and tonight Nurse Kathian Mitchell-Victor, and she will be looking at pre-diabetes and of course sharing with us her experiences in treating patients who are diabetic. And also Dr. Marvin Corian, and he's a gynecologist, and he will be looking at gestational diabetes and menopause. So let's welcome our guests this evening, Dr. Corian and Nurse Victor. Good evening. Welcome to Doctor on Call.
A pleasant good evening to everybody, to all the listeners out there in the populace, and all the viewers as well. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, indeed. Nurse Victor, it's good to have you.
Good evening, everyone. Good to be here as well.
Yes, indeed. So we continuing our focus on diabetes awareness, and this evening we're looking specifically at women's health. So I want to start with Nurse Victor. It is good respect and courtesy to allow ladies first. Is that's the norm, Nurse Victor? Ladies first, yes?
Sometimes it is.
Yes, indeed. So we'd like to talk a little bit about, of course, diabetes, but pre-diabetes. Let's talk a bit about that, how to prevent it, and then a little later on you can share with us some of the experiences in dealing with patients, who are diabetic.
Okay. First to begin, as I said, it's a pleasure being on your program, and I trust that what we say here this evening, persons will be able to associate with it and be able to put things into practice and, be able to have a better lifestyle and all of that. So first and foremost, we know that what diabetes is. Before going into pre-diabetes, maybe I just give a little caption again as to what is diabetes. And I'm not going to be talking in all the highfalutin medical words. I'm going to try to stay layman so that the simplest of person is going to be able to understand and be able to gain from this experience tonight. So we know that diabetes is basically where you have your blood glucose level or the blood sugar is too high. And we know that when it goes too high, we can have many problems, like damage to our eyes, our kidneys, our nerves in our fingers, our toes, etc. So they may say they're not feeling well, touching stuff, and they don't even know they have a prick and all of that. But before we go all there, we must remember that we have some hormones in our body stuff, and they don't even know they have a Excuse me?
Yes, yeah, go ahead. Yes, we're hearing you. Mm-hmm.
Yes, so the hormone in our body that is called insulin, and we know that insulin controls, or it's like a key that allows the glucose or the sugar in our body to go into the muscles, into the fat cells, and into the liver, etc., to be used up and stored for energy. So with pre-diabetes, we have what is called insulin resistance. And this is basically where you have the muscles and the fat cells and the liver, etc., are not able to, utilize or hold on to this glucose or the sugar. So it is remaining there in the blood, right? Causing the levels to get high, right? So if this doesn't happen well enough, we'll end up with what we call diabetes. However, a number of persons are affected with what you condition known as pre-diabetes, which is the blood sugar is not that high to be considered as being diabetic or to say that you have diabetes, right? However, it puts you prone or put you at risk to having the condition itself, or what we call type 2 diabetes, later on in life. There are many factors that can contribute to having prediabetes. Factors such as our genetics, how we are made up. We cannot choose our bloodline, right? We didn't choose it. It's just who we are, our family history, our families that we came from, right? So besides genetics, we have lifestyle, which is a big risk factor. And we talk about overweight, right? Having the age of over 45 years. This can also put you at risk for having pre-diabetes. You also may have a brother or sister or so who has diabetes. Just our being blacks, right? We have African Americans, we have Asians, Hispanic, right? So just our nature, just us being in the black race puts us at risk also for having pre-diabetes. Physical inactivity goes again with the overweight. So if we want to just sit back and do nothing in terms of exercise-wise, we just laid back, we just want to sit down and eat everything on the couch and just click the buttons on the remote control, you know what's going to happen to us there. So there and then we are not physically active. So that too can put us prone for having prediabetes. And some of the symptoms, somebody may ask, what is a symptom? What can cause me, or how would I know that, I have prediabetes? To be honest, the expert can't even say exactly what, is really linked to it, or what symptoms we should say you would experience if you have prediabetes, because you feel normal. Remember I said that the blood sugar is high, but it's not high enough to be considered as diabetes, right? So you may find yourself experiencing certain problems, like, should I say, let's back up a bit. Remember I spoke earlier on about the risk factor, like the obesity and so, right? Being overweight and all of that. Mm-hmm. So, and even the age. Remember we spoke about age 45 and over. So as a woman, if your waistline, right? If you measure your waist and it is like 35 inches or over, you're prone for prediabetes. If a man, his waist is 40 inches and over, he too is prone for diabetes, right? We also have what you call the body mass index, which in some persons may not even be high, meaning your height for your weight is not in proportion, right? Is not coming together. Mm-hmm. Right? So you're too short and you have a lot of weight. So there again, we go back to the obesity, right? So if your BMI, some persons with a high BMI would be prone for the prediabetes. However, there are some persons who would not have a high BMI and they too might be prone for prediabetes, right? Mm-hmm. You also have researchers believe that certain inflammations and so, studies have shown that when you have like all these belly fats, right, you have substances that cause like chronic and long-lasting inflammation in the body, right? You have problems with the heart and all of that. So all these can lead up to you becoming pre-diabetic, right? And even some persons may have a condition called fatty liver. These two can also play a part. Researchers believe that these two plays a part in you having prediabetes or developing prediabetes.
Okay. Now, let me just butt in a little bit. And you did mention earlier that at the pre-diabetic stage, it is very difficult to identify any particular symptom that you can point to probably cause you to think, well, maybe, this thing is coming on. But what about your blood sugar levels? Because most people, they can check their blood sugar level. And of course, this is how you determine whether it's high or low, too high, too low, or whatever it is. What kind of measurements are we looking at? Let's say in the case of one, to determine that someone is diabetic, and then we're going to backtrack to determine around what levels or what measurements can determine that someone is pre-diabetic.
Okay. So we have tests that can be done, right? The doctor may order fasting blood glucose test. And when you get that result, or you yourself may do your blood sugar at home with your machine, a reliable machine, and you notice that the blood sugar level is over 125. You did not have any breakfast as yet, and your blood sugar is over 125. That's a red flag, right? There and then, we know we are heading to diabetes.
So 125 could be considered pre?
No. Okay, well, if I should put it like that, 100 to 124, we say pre-diabetes.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So if you realize that it's 125 and that's fasting blood sugar, so you had no breakfast for the morning and you have a blood sugar of 125, we are heading on to diabetes. But it doesn't stop right there, because one reading alone would not determine your diagnosis of diabetes,
okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially if it is just 125. It could be for other reasons, because stress can also cause your blood sugar level to increase, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have what we call a oral glucose tolerance test, and Dr. Corian might make mention of this later, because this is normally done with the pregnant women, where you have to drink this amount of glucose to see, or what we call sugar, right? Sugar water, to see how much, how your body is reacting to it, how the pancreas is releasing the insulin, right? Mm-hmm. And if that level is between 140 to 199, right? We know we are in the pre-diabetic stage, and if we don't, put a handle on that early, it's going to get out of hand and then eventually goes over to diabetes. We also have another test which is called HB, or hemoglobin, right? The HbA1c is basically a test that is done to reflect the blood, your how should I put it for? Okay, it reflects a 3 months period. So it's not like you get up and you just do a blood test now and you get the fasting and you get 126, right? This one is telling you no for no, that's a fasting. However, the HbA1c tells you now for the past 3 months what your sugar level was like, right? It tells you what has been happening there and then, right? Over a 3 month period. So these are basically the 3 tests that will be done to really confirm, or which would be an eye opener to you being diabetic or pre-diabetic or so.
Right. One last question to you before I go over to Dr. Corian. Are women more prone to becoming diabetic than men?
Yes. Women are more prone for diabetes. We remember our structure, how we made up, right? And then our bodies go through a lot of physical changes. Mm-hmm. So this is one of the issues that we as women, we have to deal with.
Okay. Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'll give you a little break. I'll come back to you, but let's go to Dr. Corian. Dr. Corian, you're a gynecologist, and Nurse Victor spoke about type 2 diabetes earlier, and we know there are different types of diabetes, one of them being gestational diabetes. Let's talk a little bit about that, and of course, if there's anything that you'd probably like to go into a little more detail on what Nurse Victor said, you can do so. You're still muted, Doc.
All right, so pleasant night to everyone again. Just a bit of a correction on the credentials. I am not actually a gynecologist, but I am a general practitioner that has been associated with the obstetrics and gynecology department for a very long time.
Okay, thank you. Right? Thank you for that. Mm-hmm.
I have experience in gynecology and obstetrics.
Okay, yeah. Wonderful. Mm-hmm.
But with regards to gestational diabetes, Nurse Victor did a very good job with presenting what diabetes is and so forth, right? But when we speak of gestation, the word gestation basically points to pregnancy.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So when we speak of gestational diabetes, we speak of diabetes in pregnancy. Now, gestational diabetes is basically diabetes that is first diagnosed in pregnancy. So basically, an individual is not diabetic before pregnancy, but becomes diabetic based on certain tests that we do that we'll speak about shortly, as Nurse Victor pointed out, during pregnancy.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, also as Nurse Victor pointed out, there are certain risk factors for developing gestational diabetes, right? Which would include a family history, very, very important. Having a family history of diabetes, your mother, your father may be diabetic, but you are not yet diabetic. But because of that family history, you get pregnant and you realize, your doctor comes to you at some point in time during your pregnancy and tells you, you know what, you've developed diabetes in your pregnancy, you have gestational diabetes, and we would have to treat you for that, right? So you have your family history. People with obesity, again, is a risk factor. Sedentary lifestyle, all these are risk factors that can lead to diabetes in pregnancy, right? In terms of symptoms, unlike diabetes outside of pregnancy, gestational diabetes is, a lot of the time, it's asymptomatic, right? So it's not like diabetes mellitus, where someone may experience. There are times when they will, but it is less likely that they will present those symptoms during pregnancy, like increased urinary frequency, thirst, right? They may end up feeling hungry a lot. But a lot of the times, you may feel hungry during pregnancy, and it might be actually you might be thinking that it's because, I'm pregnant, so I have to eat for two, so I'm hungry a lot. So it's not really considered a symptom of gestational diabetes in that case, right? But how we go about diagnosing gestational diabetes is it's basically a numbers game. So many pregnant women, you have to be booked early, and this is very important for pregnant women. It's good for, once a woman gets pregnant, they should try to be booked in the district, or go to the district nurse, go to your health center before 12 weeks of pregnancy. That way, all the necessary blood tests and so forth will be done early, and any diagnosis of any particular disease, whether it be diabetes or hypertension or hyperthyroidism or anything of that sort that could complicate your pregnancy, can be diagnosed early, right? But with regards to gestational diabetes, there's a test we call the O'Sullivan test that is done around 26 to 32 weeks, right? Mainly at 28 weeks most of the times, right? We encourage our pregnant patients to have that test done at around 28 weeks, okay? Mm-hmm. And that test actually involves the ingestion of 50 grams of glucose.
Right.
So they're given a cup of glucose mixed in some water, and they're allowed to drink that glucose. Now, 1 hour after, a blood test is taken. A blood sample is taken, and we look for a particular value for the O'Sullivan test. Now, if that value is less than 140, right, that patient is considered to be okay. Then they're non-diabetic, basically. They're not a diabetic.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Now, if that value is 140 and above, then that patient would have to do a second test, right? Mm-hmm. Now, this time, this second test is called the OGTT, oral glucose tolerance test. Now, it involves having 3 blood samples taken. The first blood sample will be a fasting blood sample, where they would fast overnight. That patient would go to the lab fasting, and that first fasting glucose is taken, what we call an FBS, or fasting blood sugar. Right? This time they are given, again, a certain quantity of glucose mixed in a cup of water, about 500 mils of water, 250 to 500 mils of water. All right? And 1 hour after having ingested that glucose, 75 grams of glucose, a blood sample is taken. And then another is taken at 2 hours after ingesting that glucose. Now, as I said earlier, it's a numbers game. So we have the O'Sullivan that is taken first, and the value that we have is below 140 milligrams per deciliter. Now, with the oral glucose tolerance test, you have 3 values that we're looking for, right? Now, the fasting, that's the first blood sample that is taken. If it's less than 90, then you're considered to be okay. The 1 hour, the second sample is blood sample is taken at 1 hour after ingesting that glucose. If it's less than 180, then it's considered to be all right. And the 2 hour sample, if it's less than 153, then it's considered to be all right. So it's a numbers game. Now, a diagnosis is reached if any single one of these samples are abnormal. So if the fasting is above 90, automatically you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes, right? Okay. If that fasting is normal, but your 1 hour is altered, then you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes. And the reason for that is to narrow, right, the screening or the number of patients that can escape with diabetes and complications, because in the past they considered somebody having gestational diabetes with 2 of those values being abnormal, but in recent times they have reduced it to only 1, because statistics have shown that some people with having 1 abnormal value, they would have went on untreated and would have complications due to gestational diabetes. Some of these complications we will speak about in a bit.
Right. Dr. Corian, you mentioned, well, when you said earlier, gestational, once we're speaking gestation here, we're talking pregnancy. Gestational diabetes, does it go away after the pregnancy, or can it remain and create further complications after the pregnancy?
Very good question. Very good question. Now, a lot of the times, gestational diabetes is actually a prelude to diabetes, most of the time. Right. There are individuals who, after the pregnancy, that's why after every pregnancy, if there's a diagnosis of gestational diabetes during pregnancy, after the pregnancy, we repeat that oral glucose tolerance test, right, to ensure that person is non-diabetic, basically, right? So we repeat 6 weeks after the OGTT, similar to what I described earlier, to ensure that patient goes on to live a normal life, right? But there's a very high percentage of patients who are diabetic during pregnancy who go on to further develop diabetes later on in life. Very high percentage.
So, aside from, let's say, genetics and, someone, having or being prone because of family history, what about the pregnancy that can cause the pancreas not to function normally and cause someone to, have gestational diabetes and after the pregnancy goes away? Or in other words, the pancreas comes back to operating normally.
Right. So basically, you're speaking about the physiology of, or the pathophysiology of gestational diabetes. No, naturally, when a woman gets pregnant, of course, we know there are a lot of hormones involved in pregnancy. You have the estrogen levels shoot up, the progesterone levels shoot up, you have the inhibin, you have a bunch of hormones in play, right? Now, there's a very specific hormone. The name, I wouldn't, it makes sense mentioning the name, but there's a very specific hormone that is responsible. What is the purpose of that hormone? Is to actually maintain the blood sugar levels higher than normal during pregnancy, so that the fetus, remember you're eating for two now, a pregnant woman eats for two. So under normal circumstances, an individual will eat and that blood sugar, they use it for themselves, right? With the normal functioning pancreas, with normal levels of insulin, that blood sugar is absorbed into the muscles and the fatty tissues and so forth, stored and so forth. But that particular hormone maintains, the purpose is to maintain the blood sugar levels a little bit higher, so that sugar goes through the placenta and feeds the baby, right? That's what happens naturally. Now, with the woman with gestational diabetes, that sugar level remains higher for a longer period of time. So that's the importance of the test. The test is to see how well or how resistant your body is to insulin. So in gestational diabetes, it's not necessarily a case of the pancreas not functioning properly.
Okay.
It's more or less a case of the receptors, the insulin receptors being more resistant to insulin. Right?
What is the risk with gestational diabetes, let's say in a woman who is having twins?
That increases twofold, threefold, because with twins, everything is exacerbated. Everything is exacerbated. Your risk for hypertension is exacerbated because the more the greater the number of fetuses present at any particular time in that womb, the greater the quantity of hormones produced.
Right.
Basically. So if you have twins, it increases twofold. If someone has triplets, is pregnant with triplets, it also increases times three.
Threefold, right?
Exactly. So the risk increases with the number of fetuses pregnant at any particular time in a pregnancy.
Okay, wonderful. Doc, let's take a short commercial break. When we come back, I want to go back to Nurse Victor, and then we're going to continue the conversation. Stay with us, folks. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
If there was ever a time to keep and stay healthy, it's now! We at Hills and Valley are here to help you take deliberate steps to maintain your health. We stayed true to maintaining the most comprehensive rates while stocking the widest range of medicines and health devices, including personal protective equipment. There are so many benefits shopping with us. You get great savings through discounts for senior citizens and reward cards for loyal customers. Ask about owning yours today. Visit us at Halifax and Grenville Street, St. George, Jubilee Street opposite the Grenville Bus Terminal, and at Hillsborough, Carrico. Our wholesale distribution on Halifax Street also stocks the widest range of pharmaceuticals. We are with you on the hills and in the valleys. We are Hills and Valley Pharmacy.
Do I need to wear a mask and avoid close contact with others if I am fully vaccinated?
Thank you, and this is a very important question. The vaccines that we have against COVID-19 are very effective vaccines, and it gives a really good chance of not developing the disease. We must know that there is no vaccine that provides 100% protection for any disease. With that being said, we do expect cases of disease among people who are fully vaccinated. Though this is rare, it can happen, and we call this breakthrough infections. This is not unique to COVID-19. This doesn't mean that the vaccines aren't working. It means that not everyone who receives vaccines has 100% protection, and as a result, vaccinated persons, if they become infected, are capable of transmitting the virus to others. For these reasons, vaccinated persons must continue to practice the prevention measures like mask wearing and avoiding close contact or crowded places. So to answer your question, yes, you need to wear a mask and avoid close contact with others even if you are fully vaccinated.
Introducing Color by Sissons. 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 Color by Sissons.
Have at least a 3-month supply of prescribed medications on hand in the event of an emergency or disaster. Keep medications in a sealed, labeled container that you can carry with you at a moment's notice if you need to evacuate. A message from the Grenada Food and Nutrition Council in collaboration with the Ministry of Health with support from the Pan American Health Organization.
This is a message from the Ministry of Health. If you or a family member suspect that you may have contracted COVID-19 and are displaying symptoms, please immediately self-isolate at home. This means that you must also avoid all contact with other members of your household. Do not visit hospitals or health centers, as this creates the potential for further spread of the virus, and it puts additional persons at risk when you come into contact with them. Your best course of action is to call the COVID-19 hotline at 458-4787 or 538-4787, or contact your nearest health center or medical station. Once your information has been received, health officials will come to you. Help prevent the spread of COVID-19. This has been a message from the Ministry of Health.
This the season, Grenada, and all the action is happening on GBN. It's a mid-morning show like no other, with shopping deals, giveaways, karaoke fun, Christmas recipes, and a whole lot more. This the season for caring, sharing, and reaching out to those in need. This the season. Weekdays from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. on GBN Television, Classic Radio, and GBN's Facebook and YouTube pages. Promotion runs from November 8th to December 31st. Stay tuned to this station for more info.
Tis the Season is made possible by Ace Hardware, Kittens Healthcare, Grenada Tourism Authority, The Country Cold Store, Grenada Paper Products, and Sissons Paints.
Grenada's Chief Medical Officer has ordered that all confirmed positive COVID-19 individuals, their contacts, and members of their household must remain in quarantine or isolation for 14 days. Anyone who fails to comply with this order will be in breach of the Public Health COVID-19 Regulations 2020 and is guilty of an offense. Upon summary conviction, that person will be liable to a penalty of up to $10,000. A message from the Ministry of Health.
Welcome back. It's Doctor on Call. Those of you just joining us, we're focusing on women's health, of course, as part of diabetes awareness. And our guests, Dr. Corian and Nurse Victor. Doc, I did promise I was going to go to Nurse Victor when we came back from the break, but two questions came to mind and I don't want to forget them because I want to make sure I get as much out of you as I can. Now, a young woman, she's thinking of, having a baby. All right, but she heard about this gestational diabetes and she's quite concerned. How can she, let's say, prevent it? And secondly, how far into the pregnancy does gestational diabetes start presenting itself?
Right, very good question. Now, one of the things that we don't focus on a lot in our country is preconceptional health, right? And that's where preconceptional health comes in. Whenever someone is planning to have a pregnancy, there are a number of things that they should consider, right? The basic health is something that they should investigate clearly, ensure that they do not have any underlying disease that they are not aware of, right? So it's always good to have your family physician or your private doctor. You have a talk with that doctor and make sure that let them know that you're interested in having a baby, and all the necessary blood tests and so will be done. HbA1c, as Nurse Victor pointed out earlier. Also, exercise, very important. Exercise, dieting, eating the right foods, right? All these are very important because diabetes is described as having a multifactorial base, right? It's not just about genetics, but it's also about that environmental factor that comes into play because
lifestyle.
Exactly, lifestyle, right? One individual may have the gene that codes for developing diabetes, but because of the lifestyle, as you pointed out, exercise, diet, sticking to a nice healthy diet with your greens and your leafy vegetables and so forth, avoiding those carbohydrates with your pasta and your rice in high quantities, and that individual may not develop diabetes.
Right.
Another person may have that gene, that code, and they live the lifestyle. They drink often. They eating all the fast foods, right? All the smoothies and at all these places and so forth, and eventually they develop diabetes. So, it's very similar, right, with regards to being pregnant. A healthy lifestyle goes a very long way, right? That exercise. Yes, the gene has a strong, and the family history has a strong role to play as well, but that helps going in. And that individual, if they are living healthy before the pregnancy, there's a good chance that they don't develop gestational diabetes during the pregnancy.
Okay.
It reduces the risk significantly.
Right, and the second question as it relates to how far into the pregnancy, how soon can gestational diabetes present itself?
Right. Now, the literature doesn't specify exactly when, right? It is basically, by definition, it is diabetes that is first diagnosed during pregnancy.
Okay.
First noted during pregnancy, right? Now, the tests are done at specific times, right? Between 26 and 32 weeks for the O'Sullivan test. And if the O'Sullivan test, as I described earlier, is abnormal, then you go on to do the OGTT. Now, what is also necessary is to rule out the possibility of overt diabetes. Hence the reason why we spoke earlier about repeating the OGTT at the 6-week period, right? So someone may actually start pregnancy being diabetic but undiagnosed, right? But we cannot determine that if we discovered the diabetes during pregnancy. It's hard to determine because it was undiagnosed before the pregnancy. Now, if that individual comes in with being undiagnosed, with very high sugar values all in the pregnancy, then there's a suspicion that individual may have had diabetes before the pregnancy.
Okay.
All right? And that again would prompt us to do that OGTT, ensuring that the OGTT is done after the pregnancy, right? So that person can continue being treated even outside of pregnancy for the diabetes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much, Dr. Corian. Nurse Victor, I'm coming back to you. Well, I'm sure you've been a nurse for quite a long time, and you, very experienced. Patients who are diabetic, take us through a little bit. One, maybe the female who is not pregnant but diabetic, and then maybe you can share with us your experience on pregnant patients who are diabetic. So let's talk about, how you treat patients who are diabetic, some of the experiences you've had, how you had to deal with them. I know sometimes patients can be a little stubborn, so you may have to be a little firm and say, listen, I am telling you, you're not supposed to use that, and I mean that. Let's talk a bit about that.
Okay. Well, first, with the woman that is not pregnant and diabetic, right? Well, we have on the district, we have what you call chronic disease clinic. I'm not on the district presently, right? I work at hospital. However, during these clinics, they would have numerous education sessions, right? So they know what to eat, what not to eat, how to care for themselves. They already have the condition, right? And as you said, some are very stubborn, and indeed, we know how we can be at times. However, we have to just stick at them, encourage them, and let them know it's not the end of the world. They can get through this, and just follow the guidelines, basically, because you have the blueprint there to help you. The experts would have done all the tests and, all the researches. They're out, to know exactly how to assist them. So they just need to listen and practice what is said to them, right? And then with the woman that is diabetic now, pregnant. Yes, with the pregnant woman now, it's more risky because you're not only caring for your life, but you're caring for an unborn, or maybe 2 or 3, right? So it goes right back to diet and exercise and, just following the guidelines, basically, right? Because with a pregnant woman now who would have gestational diabetes, the high risk now to this baby being even larger than, a woman who is pregnant and not diabetic, right? During the delivery, you can have numerous problems encountered there, right? With a large baby, the person may even need to have what you call a cesarean section. So they may not even be able to do a vaginal delivery because the baby is too large, right? And they put themselves at risk, they put the baby at risk, right? And at the end of the day, the entire family is disturbed because it's not only the mommy they're thinking of, or maybe the husband that's thinking of just the wife, but there's a mother thinking of her daughter and her granddaughter, likewise the husband thinking of the same, So it's just a whole thing of just listening to the guidelines
and following. Right.
Just follow the guidelines.
Right. You mentioned cesarean section, and as we say, you took the word out of my mouth, because I was about to ask you what are some of the complications that can present themselves if a pregnant mother has to do a cesarean section, and that is someone who's diabetic.
Right. So I think Dr. Corian would be the best person to answer this question. I hope I'm right, Dr. Corian?
Doc?
Well, I can definitely take this one, but let's just backtrack a little bit with regards to treatment, right? With the treatment of patients with gestational diabetes, it's a little bit more strict with regards to that. The regime is a very strict regime as because of the complications that can occur, right? Now, with the gestational diabetes, a patient comes in after they're diagnosed, they're placed on a strict diet, right? Most of the times, it's between 1,800 and 2,000 kilocalories, very specifically calculated based on the height of the patient, right? They're given that diet. Now, after giving that diet, they keep that diet strictly for 2 days. They're actually admitted to ensure that they keep that diet. And to ensure that diet works for them. That's how serious it is. It's not just about going in and eating food and measuring, trying to measure.
But doc, let me just butt in here and play out devil's advocate. You know, there's some patients they tell you, I ain't want the hospital food. My husband go bring food, or my daughter go bring food for me. I can't eat this thing in the hospital.
We get that a lot. It happens all the time. But they eventually understand that if they don't eat what they're supposed to eat, then they spend a longer time in the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah? Because a patient doesn't leave being a diabetic unless those blood sugars are controlled.
Right.
Right? So we start them on a strict diet, and after 48 hours on that strict diet, then they do what we call a profile, a glucose profile. Right? And again, as I said earlier, it's a lot about numbers. It's a numbers game. So again, you do a fasting. All right. So before going to that, your diet will consist of basically 6 meals per day. Right? So you're gonna have your breakfast, a snack, lunch, a snack, supper, a snack. Right? But that total calories comes up to the 1,800 kilocalories or the 2,000 kilocalories based on your height. Right? So after those 48 hours, we do that profile. And it's a numbers game again. It's a numbers game. We do the fasting, we do 2-hour blood check after the breakfast, 2 hours after the lunch, 2 hours after the supper. Right? And now if those values, the fasting is 90 or less, we can relax with that.
Okay.
If the other values are 110, between 110 and 120, we can also send you home.
Right.
But anything above, if it's still uncontrolled, then you have to start insulin. Yeah.
Okay.
It's very strict because of the complications involved, and complications including big baby as what we call macrosomia, baby being too large for delivery, which can lead to C-section. So having a cesarean section, as Nurse Victor just pointed out, right? Even what we call we can have a fetal demise, idiopathic death, because of high sugar levels, right? So sometimes we have patients that, they just walk in and you check no fetal movement, you check the blood sugar, they were undiagnosed with gestational diabetes, and baby is no longer alive. And that's how serious this thing is, and that's why preconceptional health is very important. And that's why knowing how controlled you are with regards to your blood sugar in pregnancy, that's why it's so important. Because to carry a child for 9 months and eventually lose it just because you weren't aware of your sugar levels, it's a difficult thing.
Yeah, it is. But doc, do you let's say for example a patient who's probably diabetic and I'm going beyond gestational now, and you give when that woman gives birth, are any tests done on that baby to determine whether sugar levels might be high, or that's not necessary?
Oh no, of course. From the time a baby is born, especially with a diabetic mother, the blood, because one of the complications of neonate and newborn is hypoglycemia, right? Instead of the blood sugar levels being high, they're not being low, because that baby is used to a sugary environment. It's surrounded by sugar, basically gets sugar from the mother constantly. The insulin levels are high in the baby during intrauterine life. Now when that baby comes out, it's cut off from that constant supply of sugar he was getting from the mom, right? That's when the mother is uncontrolled during pregnancy, right? So because that baby is cut off from that constant supply of sugar, and the insulin levels are high because it's basically programmed for a lot of sugar, that baby's blood sugar may drop instantly. So when that baby is born, the nurses like Nurse Victor and her team, they have to constantly be checking that blood sugar for a period of time and ensuring that blood sugar levels stay above 50 milligrams per deciliter, or else the baby can go into coma, baby can have seizures, right? Baby can die.
Okay.
So, of course, a number of blood tests are done. Apart from just the blood sugar levels, you have your complete blood count. They're doing the sickle cell screen now to check for the bilirubin. A number of blood tests are done on the baby.
Yeah. You mentioned sickle cell. Someone, let's say a sickler, who's probably diabetic and pregnant. What's the kind of complications there? Is it recommended or not?
No.
Not recommended.
That's a very horrible combination.
Okay.
As sicklers on a whole, I'm almost certain, well, the programs that we have established on the island do not suggest that any sickler, full-blown sickler, gets pregnant.
Okay, it's not a good idea. Okay.
It's not a good idea because it's very risky for them. And unfortunately, we have lost a few sicklers to postpartum period in the past, unfortunately. Right? There are those who survive.
Yes.
But it's a gamble on your life, basically. Any sickler who decides to get pregnant, full-blown sickler who decides to get pregnant, it's a gamble on your life.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. Let's move on a bit, and Nas, I'm coming back to you because I have a few questions I have to put at you. Don't mind me smiling. I'm coming back to you, Doc. Let's move on a little bit past the diabetes and focus a little bit on some more general, women's health. Of course, from a young age, you grow up, you grow older, we all grow older. Women in particular, they enter a specific phase of life, menstruation.
Right.
Let's talk about that. First, what it is, and when does it start? What are some of the complications? And is there a good side to that?
Okay. So are we talking about menstruation or menopause?
My apologies. Menopause. My apologies.
I understand the confusion because it is said that most of women's problems begin with men. So you have menstruation.
No. Doc, I take offense. I take offense. and Nas Victor doesn't agree with you. Nas doesn't agree with you.
I hope he doesn't.
Yes, indeed.
Don't worry. I understand. So menopause. Now, menopause, another of the issues of women is, you ask me when it starts, it usually starts between 45 to 55 years old. Basically, it's the cessation or the stoppage of the menstrual cycle.
Right.
Right? And a woman is determined to be menopausal when she would have not had her menses or her period for a period of 12 months. Right?
Okay.
So between the ages of 45 to 55, average age of 50, 51, a woman will stop seeing her period. And if that period stays away for 12 months or more, then she's considered to be menopausal.
No, and we're talking about around that particular age.
Around that particular age.
Right, okay.
Right? Some people have it a little earlier, 45. Some people have it a little later, 55. Right? But on average, it happens around 50, 51 years old.
Okay.
What's the other question?
Yeah. So let's talk about what is involved. I know, some people, they do have a difficult time. Some people, just like that, no big deal.
So, as we all know, human beings, we are basically governed. A lot of our physiological functions are governed by hormones, right? The female, the woman, she has a number of hormones that govern her physiological functions, right? Including progesterone, estrogen. We have the what we call a follicle-stimulating hormone, the luteinizing hormone, which we both have, right? And then we have the gonadotropins releasing hormone. It's all about a whole axis of hormones that starts in the brain, goes to the pituitary gland, and goes to the ovaries, right? Now, at that particular age, 50, 51, what happens is that the follicles, due to, let's say, using up of those follicles, because going back to embryology, a woman is basically born with a set number of follicles, right, in the ovary. Those follicles are what develop into eggs and are during ovulation, right, which usually happens 14 days before her menstrual cycle or her menses, right? Now, over time, those follicles are used up, right? So, because these follicles are used up, your estrogen levels, they begin to drop, right? Your progesterone levels, because there are no follicles to develop into what we call the corpus luteum, those progesterone levels, they begin to drop. And the follicle stimulating hormone that increases, right? There's no negative feedback from those hormones because the estrogen and the progesterone, they're no longer present. The follicle stimulating hormones from the pituitary gland, that's in the brain, they tend to increase, right? Now, what happens, so in simpler terms now, apart from all the scientific terms, what happens is that a woman starts to experience symptoms of menopause.
Right.
Now, the symptoms of menopause, it is said to begin approximately 6 years before the woman actually goes into menopause, right? And may continue for a very amount of years after she actually has her last period, which is actual menopause.
Okay.
Right? Now, these symptoms would include what we call hot flashes or flushes, right? A woman may experience insomnia. She may experience weight gain, bloating. She may experience depression. She may experience headaches, right? All these things are symptoms of menopause, right? And some of the detrimental effects of menopause would also include osteoporosis or bone loss. It may even affect their cognition, their memory, right? So menopause again is a very significant, I wouldn't like to call it a disease, but a phase in a woman's life.
Okay. Nurse Victor, has any woman been hospitalized because of menopause or complications from menopause? Any experiences there?
In my experiences, what I can recall, I'm not in that area, right? So I can't really speak to it presently. However, I could remember in my district here nursing life during the district times, I can recall persons coming to the clinic because of symptoms of menopause. They can't deal with even the depression, right? This is one of the one that is more common, I should say, to the women that they would fall victim to, right? Depression, because the dealing with those moods is not easy, and they just go into this depressed state, and it's like they can't really come out of it. So I can remember depression. I think I had one lady who, basically it was for depression again.
Depression.
That's the one I can recall. Yeah.
Right. Doc, a lot of women, sometimes they're not sure and they miss it. I remember an experience where actually my mom and asked me to come to speak to a lady because she felt that there were things happening to her that was not normal. In fact, it was likened to evil, so to speak. And because in doing the program, and I learned a bit about that and some of the things that can go along with it, and I recall asking that question, and in fact it was that the lady was experiencing. So sometimes they're not aware, and they think of all sort of different things that could happen, and sometimes rather than seeking the medical help, they may turn to other things. which can probably complicate the situation. But people who are, going through a depressive state because of menopause, what kind of help can they be given?
All right. Now, there is some, apart from just counseling and so forth, there's something called hormonal replacement therapy. Right? The objective basically is to replace some of the hormones that was lost, to try to help with the symptoms that that individual is dealing with. Now, we may take the hot flashes and flushes lightly, right? But they can actually be what leads the individual to depression and psychosis and so forth, right? Because what happens is that those hot flashes, vasomotor, what we call vasomotor symptoms, can be so severe that that individual ends up with the insomnia, right? They're not sleeping at night, and furthermore, they end up sleep deprived.
Right.
Now, sleep deprivation is very detrimental to the brain, right? When you lose sleep, it affects your cognition, it affects your behavior, it affects your mood. Now, I don't know if you've spent an entire night up reading or studying, and you end up losing sleep and you feel grumpy, you feel off, so to speak. Yeah? Imagine having to do an entire week losing sleep because at night you're feeling hot for some reason, you feel that heat that comes from your navel and goes up to your head, and you start to sweat and you can't sleep, right? For a few weeks. Then you end up suffering significantly, and you need the help. The help that is offered is that hormonal replacement therapy, and it goes a long way, right? With those severe sort of symptoms, they come in. First of all, you may try to you coax them and you monitor them for a while, but depending on the severity of those symptoms, you may start with low doses of that hormonal replacement therapy. Estrogen, to be more specific, there's one what we call Primarin, which we use a lot, and some people use evening primrose. A lot of the women, they're familiar with evening primrose, the Primarin from that. And it helps a lot. You start with a low dose and you give them the lowest maintenance dose that keeps them in a more comfortable state, right? So they don't have those sort of symptoms.
Right. Yeah. Another thing relating to that. So we understand that the hormones, of course, the body produces less, and does it get to a point where it actually stops producing the hormones altogether?
Right. Eventually, the body would no longer be producing any of those estrogen and progesterone.
Right. Great. So if that's the case, then why does the symptoms of menopause eventually subside and the woman comes back to normal?
Right. So after a period of time, the body basically just gets used to the high levels of the FSH and the LH in the system, right? Physiologically. I mean, it's constantly there, but the body, the receptors, they go away, the effects, it basically wanes over time. Yeah, but basically acclimatizes, so to speak, right? Adapt to the new internal environment of not having estrogen and progesterone.
All right. How long does that take? Approximately?
It varies. In some women, it may take as little as a year. There are some women who don't really experience much postmenopausal symptoms.
Right.
But there are those who it's severe. The more severe it is, the longer it may last if you don't get any hormonal replacement therapy.
Right. Yeah? Okay.
It varies from person to person.
Okay, wonderful. One more question before we take our final break. The whole issue of menopause. Women going through menopause, having all the symptoms, all these difficulties, depression, all of that, and then all of that subsides, and you probably come back to normal. How does all these changes affect a woman's sex life or her sexuality?
Right, very important. Again, now with menopause, apart from the physiological changes, we have a lot of actual physical changes occurring in the woman, right? Especially with respect to the genitalia. The mucosa within the vagina, that changes completely. Right? Initially, it becomes a little bit redder. It's more red because it thins out, and the capillaries under the skin they start to show up.
Right.
And from that, it becomes pale because those capillaries now they disappear. Another thing that happens is that the folds in the vagina, they become smooth, right? Because of the lack of exposure to those hormones, the folds in the vagina, it becomes smooth. So what happens is that the woman is no longer moist.
Okay.
And that lack of moisture can cause what we call dyspareunia, right? Or painful sex. During insertion, it's painful. So a woman would, for that reason, may abstain from sex.
Yeah, kind of psychological effect.
Yeah, of course, because of the pain. And again, if you're not exposed to those hormones, estrogen is very important in sexuality. Estrogen, those hormones in particular, the progesterone, the luteinizing hormone, very important, right? Because it basically controls a woman's desire for sex, right? Now, the body's programmed in such a way that at ovulation, a woman's desire for intimacy with her partner increases around ovulation because of the spike in the levels of the luteinizing hormone and that of the estrogen as well, right? As they get closer to menopause, those hormone levels drop, right? Therefore, the desire, right, decreases as well. The libido gets less as well. So it definitely affects a woman's desire for sex, a woman's sexuality, both physically and mentally, right, because of those hormone levels.
Okay. So, Doc, let's take our final commercial break. After that, we'll open our telephone lines. Of course, our listeners may have questions that they would like to ask, so we'll take that after. Stay with us. We'll be back with you in just a moment.
You can now send a gift card to your loved ones locally or internationally thanks to the food fair. Here's how it works. Click the gift card icon or banner, customize your gift card by choosing from different templates, dollar amount, and personalized messages. You can also upload your personal design. Select add to cart and complete transaction. Allow relatives and friends to pick up an item or items at the food fair for the dollar value. Gift card, it's that easy.
A whole new level of convenience and comfort awaits you when you shop at Rise and Shine Supermarket and Hardware Supplies, Griffin Lane, Grenville. Convenient, because we are open Sunday to Sunday. We're even at your service on public holidays. Comfort, because we are easily accessible to the physically challenged. Free Wi-Fi is available while you shop, and bags come at no charge. Everyday low prices and excellent customer care. Adequate parking available. We supply everything you can possibly think of. Family and home supplies, fresh meat, vegetables, and personal care products. All brands of cooking gas at affordable prices. You can send in your order, have it pulled, or pick up express.
When a loved one passes on, we all need the comfort, support, and guidance of a trusted friend. You can rely on LaCour Brothers Funeral Home. We provide a personalized professional service that exceeds all expectations. Our dedicated staff responds to your every need with the greatest detail, ensuring affordability with a variety of options. Our upgraded state-of-the-art facilities, spacious air-conditioned chapel with live internet streaming, a modern, environmentally safe crematorium, the only of its kind on island, private viewing spaces, large on-site repast center, a modern transportation fleet. Join our burial society today and make personalized arrangements for that final moment as you prepare to enter your loved one into eternal rest. Visit or call LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and select a package that brings added comfort to the entire family. LaCour LaCour Brothers Funeral Home and Burial Society, continuing a tradition of excellence.
Stop the spread of germs that can make you and others sick. Cover your nose and mouth with a tissue when you cough or sneeze. If you don't have a tissue, use your elbow. Wash hands often, especially after coughing or sneezing into a tissue.
Welcome back. It's Doctor and Call, and our telephone line is now open. Our telephone number 435-2041. So we're inviting you to call if you have any questions that you would like to ask Dr. Korean or Nurse Victor. You can do so. The number again, 435-2041. Yes, so you can give us a call, and of course we'll try as best as possible to answer your questions, or if you have any contributions, we welcome them as well. Doc, let me just come back to you, and I just want to, we're talking about the issue of the menopause. Women having to go through what you mentioned earlier, how can they be helped? What sort of are there any treatment that can be recommended? Because of course, if you have a case, let's say you have someone who's married, a woman, she has a husband. Of course, there's intimacy between them is very important. So there is an issue on one side, which of course will require some understanding from the husband. But of course, all things being equal, everything must be taken into consideration. So, the woman comes to you, Doc, this is my position. It is difficult for me. How can you help? What can you recommend?
Okay. Well, in case of the dryness or so, what is recommended is lubrication. Those exogenous lubrications like the KY jelly and so forth, they actually help a lot. Mm-hmm. They actually help a lot. Because what I've noticed, I've learned from a few patients is that sometimes the desire is actually there, right? And they actually understand that they have a partner, and and that's that's part of their commitment to their partner. And so even though the hormonal level may decrease and the libido is not as high as it used to be, because of the understanding of that commitment, they're still willing, right? Out of love to please their partner. So a lot of the times, just with the lubrication from the pharmacy or so, that goes a long way. And also with the hormonal replacement therapy, that also helps to bring, increase the estrogen levels to a level where it helps the libido. Okay, wonderful. Right? So that part is not affected so direly in that situation.
Okay, let's go to the telephone. We have a caller on the line. Doctor and Call, good evening. We seem to have a little issue there. Let me try again and see what happens. I think we're having an issue here. I'm not sure what the problem is. I've been experiencing that. I'm not sure if it's on my end, but we're gonna try again. Another question, Doc. With those complications, does it affect, and we understand the issue of the estrogen dropping and all of that, does it also interfere with a woman's ability to have an orgasm?
That, how do I answer that? Not necessarily, right? Because the orgasm is a complex topic, yeah, and it relies on a few factors, well enough, right?
Okay.
That includes psychological, right, stimulation, and I guess it goes down to that state of those changes in the female organ, right? So it may affect, but I think that if a woman is taken care of during properly stimulated, so to speak, I think an orgasm is still attainable.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it may be affected. It may be affected because of the same dyspareunia, painful insertion. But I think as long as the partner is considerate enough, right, understands what is going on, and that's why woman's health is not only for the woman,
right,
also for the. When we speak of menopause, men should be educated on menopause and what to expect as well, right, so that they can understand the situation, be considerate, and let the love continue, not just sexual, but understand how to please the woman without
kind of support, moral support, and all of that. Okay, good. Let's try the telephone again. I hope it's not an issue on my end here. Dr. Call, good evening. All right. I think the problem is with my lines because I experienced it earlier and I wasn't sure, and it's happening again. So unfortunately, we may not be able to access telephone calls this evening. Callers, I am very sorry. I do apologize, but there seemed to be a problem with my line here. We will have it rectified tomorrow so that we can, engage you again. So I do apologize for that. I didn't realize it was a problem with my line. It's only occurring to me. It's happening now. So, Doc, what we're going to do, of course, yourself and Nurse Victor, let us, because we're getting close to wrap-up time at 9:30, so let us sort of just go back a bit and probably just summarize some of the things that we discussed as a rate. One, pre-diabetes, and of course, some aspects of the gestational diabetes. So, we will come back to Nurse Victor, and let's just summarize, briefly what we said as it relates to pre-diabetes.
Okay, so want the listening audience to remember what really is pre-diabetes. Basically, as I said before, it's having high blood sugar levels, but it's just not high enough to be considered as diabetes, right? So remember, it's important that you have a proper lifestyle, your diet, meaning have more on your plates, more of the vegetables, more of the greens, and have more of your fruits, and so than having a whole plate of rice and just drop a piece of stewed chicken on top of it, right? So you want to avoid that. You want to also remember to exercise. So having a healthy lifestyle and just ensuring that you eat properly, exercise, basically, because statistics have shown that persons who are pre-diabetic are 50%, 50% of times they will become diabetic. So you want to cut that. You want to ensure that even if you're told that you're pre-diabetic, you don't cross that line of going over to being diabetic. So, diet, exercise, right? So that you can prevent it. And if you're told that you have pre-diabetes, your doctor would say, okay, you need to come back and check again every 3 years or so. Or he says every year, come and do your blood test to make sure that you don't cross over. Do it, right? Very, very importantly, do it.
Okay, wonderful. Doc, there is something I wanted to throw at you and it missed me as it relates to gestational diabetes. Polycystic ovary syndrome. Let's just talk a little bit about that. I get the feeling that it is something that is pretty common in Grenada among our women.
But polycystic ovarian syndrome that's an entirely new topic altogether.
Right.
Yeah. But basically, it's a situation where the ovaries, because of the presence of a number of cysts, there's a high production of estrogen. Right, the estrogen levels are high. Sometimes your testosterone levels are high as well. Right, and you have what you call anovulatory cycles, where the person they don't actually ovulate. You have some of the signs or symptoms would be things like what we call virilization of the genitalia, where enlargement of the clitoris and so forth. You may have what we call hirsutism, where you may find a female a bit hairy, right? You have some beard growing, hairy legs and arms and so forth. These people, they have a tendency to be a little bit thicker or increased adiposity.
Right.
So they tend to be fat, basically. They tend to be fat, right? They don't have a normal menstrual cycle. So sometimes when they do have a cycle, they don't actually ovulate. They have abnormal cycle where they may skip an entire month, or skip 6 months, or even skip a year, right? And these people are not sometimes described as being subfertile. So it may be a bit more difficult for a woman with polycystic ovarian syndrome. It may be a bit more difficult for her to actually have a baby.
Right.
Right. Now, with regards to diabetes, because of the presence of the fat and the adiposity, and so these people actually have a predisposition for diabetes. Right? So a lot of the time they're actually treated with medication for diabetes.
Right. Well, it wasn't that premise I asked, because I've heard that.
Okay, the link. Yeah. So they're because of that predisposition, they are sometimes treated with metformin and so forth. And when it comes to actually having a child, they can be given a medication to actually stimulate ovulation. In particular, a medication that we use a lot is called Clomid.
Right.
So that medication is prescribed, and they give it at a particular time during the cycle, and that patient, it increases their chance of ovulating, and as long as they are active during that time of expected ovulation, they can actually have a baby.
Right.
But that individual is not infertile, right? Or they're not sterile.
Okay.
Because I've known many persons who have suffered from PCOS, and they got pregnant.
Right. But what are the chances of, let's say, people who have that condition, what are the chances of having miscarriages?
I think the most difficult thing a lot of the time is getting pregnant initially.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
No, there are those patients that, because of the lack of progesterone, it might be difficult for them to maintain a pregnancy, because progesterone is very important in maintaining pregnancy. Right. Now, what happens with the progesterone, with basically the whole pregnancy issue, is that after the egg is released, right, from what we call a Graafian follicle, and so ovulation occurs, and a corpus luteum is formed. And that corpus luteum, the purpose of that corpus luteum is to produce that hormone called progesterone. And that progesterone coming from that corpus luteum is there to maintain that pregnancy after implantation and so forth, until a placenta develops, right? So there are patients because of PCOS or some other reason, with low progesterone levels, right, who actually have to be given progesterone to maintain a pregnancy in some cases.
Okay, wonderful.
Without that progesterone, they can actually have a miscarriage.
All right. Okay. Wonderful. So just quickly now summarize the whole issue of gestational diabetes, and then we would wrap for this evening.
So going back to gestational diabetes, as we said earlier, it is diabetes that is diagnosed during pregnancy, right? We spoke about the risk factors. We say that it can, your family history is very important in terms of risk factors. Genetics, very important. In terms of the symptoms, a lot of the times the patient is asymptomatic. They don't usually present with those symptoms of increased urinary frequency and thirst and these things, but it's a numbers game, as we pointed out. Right? It's all about doing that O'Sullivan at around 28 weeks, and if it's high, then you do that at OGTT, right? And if any of these values are high, then you're diagnosed with gestational diabetes, right? How we treat, we spoke about that very strict diet. So to all your patients out there with family history of diabetes, if at any point in time your doctor tells you that you have gestational diabetes, prepare to come into hospital and to follow that very strict diet, right? And something else that I should add is that on the ward, you get to see the nutritionist, and the nutritionist is going to give an orientation on all the diet that you have to keep after you're discharged from hospital. So you'll be educated on how to keep a balanced diet, basically for your body type, right?
Right.
And very important again are the complications. As Victor would have mentioned, some of the complications of gestational diabetes, and we can actually divide them into maternal complications in the mother, and the fetal complications. Some of the maternal complications include hypertension in pregnancy, right? Which can actually turn into another big complication, which is preeclampsia and eclampsia, right? Which is high blood pressure with seizures. And those could be very, very, very severe and result in fatalities as well, right? As Victor also mentioned, the risk for cesarean section, right? That increases because babies are big. The risk for diabetes after pregnancy as well, with the maternal risk complications, right? With the fetus, you may have macrosomia, you may have hypoglycemia in the neonate, right? You may have what we call polycythemia that can lead to hyperbilirubinemia, or jaundice, as we know it, and respiratory distress syndrome as well, right? So all these are complications that you may find in the neonate or in the fetus.
Okay.
Right? And to conclude, we always do that postnatal OGTT 6 weeks after delivery, to ensure that, or to rule out over diabetes.
Okay.
If you're diabetes at that period, then you send to your district doctor or even to an internist to manage your diabetes.
Okay, wonderful indeed. Well, Dr. Corrier and Nurse Victor, I thank you very much for accepting the invitation to be here on the program. It was indeed a pleasure. As always, I've learned quite a bit, and I look forward. I usually say to all my guests, once you come on the program, be prepared, you'll be back, because I'll be calling you again. So, and there was something you mentioned earlier that I'm very keen on doing a program, preconceptional health. I think this is very important. I would like us to do a program on that. So definitely sometime soon I'll contact you so we can actually do a program on preconceptional health. So again, I thank you all very much for being here as we continue to raise awareness on diabetes, and I look forward to doing another program with you. Any final words you would like to say before we close off, Nurse Victor?
It was a pleasure being here, and I hope the little that we shared, the audience was able to grasp it, and we know they were not able to call in, to ask their questions or so.
Yes, unfortunately.
But they can reach out to the Diabetes Resource Center. That's in Tantine. The phone number is 440-0888. Right? They can reach out to us there and send their questions in. Even if they reach out to me at the hospital, they may know another nurse. You can ask. Ask any one of us. And if we don't know, we'll be sure to find out for you. Okay, so That's my final word.
Thank you very much. Dr. Corian, anything in closing? Any final words you'd like to say to our listeners?
Well, again, it's definitely a pleasure for me to be here tonight, and whenever you're ready to call me, I'm ready and willing for us to speak on any topic that you propose.
Well, I'm very happy to hear that. Yes, indeed.
So Grenada, stay healthy, stay safe, and let's just continue doing what we're doing.
Thank you very much. Well, that's all the time we have this evening, folks. We thank you very much for staying with us. Again, I apologize for not being able to take the calls. I really didn't realize the problem was on my end, and so we'll have it rectified very early tomorrow. Of course, tomorrow evening we have our calling program, so we'll have that sorted out. Thank you once again, and of course, don't forget to take care of yourselves. Eat healthy. Diabetes, it's very, very prevalent here in Grenada, so let's try as much as possible to prevent it. And if we do have it, let us keep it under control, because if we do, we can live normal. Thank you very much, and do have a good night.